Hello, welcome to A Moment in Time with Nex. If your brain is hungry, I hope this helps. Today I'm doing a book review on the book called Connected, The Amazing Power of Social Networks and How They Shape Our Lives by Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler. I really enjoyed this book. I'll probably give it at least 4 stars, maybe 5 stars on my Goodreads page. And if you haven't already signed up for my book reviews email, you can do that at my website, nexjuice.com. So this one's not going to be very long. There's probably like 5 or 6 key takeaways that I got from this book that I found really interesting, some of which you may already be familiar with. And I thought it was kind of cool because I actually had learned about some of the stuff in this book in other books that referenced this book. So lots of good stuff in here. A lot of stuff that's a little bit common sense, but it's good to see the data and the studies that they've done around it. So the first thing I thought was interesting, and most of you have probably heard of before, is the idea of 6 degrees of separation. So they have found that we are all about 6 degrees separate from each other. So 1 degree is one link between 2 people. So me and one of my friends, that's 1 degree separate. Their friend, who I don't know, is 2 degrees away from me. And then that friend's friend goes on to 6 degrees, and pretty much everyone in the world is roughly 6 degrees away from each other. So if you really wanted to access someone in the world, you would only have to go 6 degrees away from yourself to get to that person. So that's a really amazing piece of information if you really think about it. With over 7 billion, nearly 8 billion people on this planet, we're only 6 degrees, 6 relationships away from anyone. Now, this is probably not 100% accurate considering like remote villages in very isolated island nations and things like that. But generally speaking, at least in the like more modernized world, we're about 6 degrees separated from just about anybody. But what I found even more interesting than that was that the idea of 3 degrees of influence. So this is really, really important to understand. And I'm sorry, I think my neighbors are like banging around it. If there's background noise, I'm sorry, but I want to make this video and I don't want to wait until 2 in the morning to do it. So 3 degrees of influence means that not only do you influence directly the person that you have an interaction with. We all know that. If I flip off somebody in traffic, I know that I've impacted that person. What I might not realize is that the impact I have on that person then goes and impacts their sphere of influence, everyone in their network, and then 1 degree even beyond that. So not only are you impacting that one person, but you're impacting their friends and the friends of those friends. So this is really important to understand and to realize that butterfly effect, that ripple effect that we have on the world around us. And what kind of impact do we want to have? How do we want to influence the world around us? How do we want to influence our spheres and our networks and their networks and their networks? So it goes out 3 degrees from us. So why not make it a positive impact? Why not send a positive ripple out into that human superorganism that I'm taking from them in this book? They kind of coined that term of the human superorganism. Can you hear that? I was recording my podcast last night and it was like every single motorcycle and police and ambulance, like they were all just wanting to be out at 1 in the morning last night. Anyway, I digress. Doesn't matter. If there's some truck noise in the background, cry me a river. So I live in the world and we're impacting each other, right? There's influence here. Let's make it a positive one. I love trucks. I love that trucks help us to get around. They help us to move stuff. They make life easier. They're an amazing tool. And I'm very grateful that there's trucks out there. So thank you, truck. All right. So up next is location, location, location. So they talk about how it's important to be connected, right? The more connections you have, the more opportunities you have and the better outcomes you have. But what's even more important than the number of connections that you have is where in the network you are located. So people who are more centrally located in the network are actually, they have the best outcomes. They have the most opportunities and they're the best connected. They're like these cornerstone, important, vital pieces of this superorganism, this human, it's a great word, this organism, because we think that we're individuals, right? Especially in America, where I've been born and raised, we love individualism, that we are completely separate from everyone else, and we can make our own choices and we can make our own destiny. But the reality is that everyone in the world impacts us. Maybe not every single person, but all the people within that 3 degrees of influence. So think about it in the reverse too. Not only do you have an impact on people 3 degrees away from you, but 3 degrees away from you is also influencing you. So what are you allowing to influence you? What people are in your network, and who's in their network? And who's in those people's network? And how might that be impacting you? How might that be influencing you? Is it a positive impact or is it a negative one? So start to think about, who are you surrounding yourself with and how might they be influencing you in addition to how you influence them and their networks. It kind of ties into this concept of the potency proximity principle, which isn't from this book, but it talks about how the potency of something, the power of something, is more impactful the closer you get to it, like a strong smell. So the closer you are to something that smells really strong, the more you smell it, the more it impacts you. And it's the same thing with humans. So if you're this powerful source of positivity, the closer people get to you, the more you impact them. But people who are powerful sources of negativity, the closer we get to them, the more they impact us. So we want to really be mindful of what we're allowing to have influence and impact over us, because life is short. We're not getting any younger. And what kind of influences do we want to welcome into our lives? And what might we want to start distancing ourselves from? So not only is it beneficial to be centrally located in these networks, but what that means is that those people who are on the periphery, so if you think of it like people who have a lot of connections tend to be more towards the middle of this network. If you just think of like a web, so think of yourself, think of every single person that you're connected to as a branch off of you, and then everyone that those people are connected to are branches off of them, and it forms this really dense, really complex, intense network, this big structure, this big web. But the people who are on the outer edges, those are the people who have the fewest connections. And what they've found in research is that not only do they have substantially less connections than the average person, but they actually atrophy those connections over time. Atrophy means they lose them. Those connections go away. So people either do, like I just advised you to do, to remove negative people from your network and from your life. People either consciously remove them from their networks, or like what happens with anyone, maybe someone moves away or someone passes away, something happens to cause that connection to die. And now the person has even less connections. I believe they atrophy a connection every 2 years or so. So eventually what that means, if they aren't reintegrated back into the networks, if they don't make new connections, which they tend not to because it's more difficult for them, there's a reason they're on the periphery. It could be substantial mental illness. It could be, violent, abusive tendencies. For some reason, they've kind of been pushed out of the group. They're being socially ostracized. And unfortunately, if they don't figure out a way to get back in, they become completely isolated and completely separate from this organism. And humans aren't meant to live that way. So these people have substantially higher risk of ending their own lives and of just really negative outcomes. Very low access to resources, very little opportunity, low income, probably low health, definitely low health outcomes. They've even found that they theorize in this book that your social network is one of the most important components of your life, more than your gender, more than your age, more than your race, more than your socioeconomic status, that your outcomes, so like how quickly you recover from a surgery, has more to do with who you're connected to and how many connections you have than it does to pretty much anything else. I'm very skeptical about that theory. These are, from what I can tell, two white guys writing this book. For them to say, oh yeah, it's more important your social network than your race, it just seems like a white guy thing to say. I'm sorry, but I read White Fragility not too long ago. I did my review on that if you want to check that out. These are just my opinions. These are my perceptions of this book. So do I really think that your social network is the most important piece of your life? No. Do I think it's very, very, very important? Absolutely. So I think that it's important to be aware. Who are you connected to? How can you increase those connections, strengthen those connections? But what's also really interesting is the power of weak ties, which I've talked about because I've read about it in some other books, but I'm pretty sure it originates originally from this book, Connected. And this means that people that you have some connection to, but not a super strong connection, those people are like a gold mine. Because the people in your direct network, like the people that you spend the most time around, the people you see at work every day, the people you live with, the family members you're really close to, the friends you're close to, you talk all the time, you kind of know what each other knows, right? You've already kind of like not used up those resources, but you're kind of running in the same circles, so you kind of have access to a lot of the same things. So those relationships aren't super powerful in terms of potential for growth and change. That random guy that was in your science class junior year in high school, now he's in a completely different network from you, and he has been learning all sorts of different things, and he has access to all sorts of different people and opportunities that you're not even aware of. And by reaching out to him and reconnecting to him, or asking him, hey, do you know anyone in this area or this industry, maybe some recommendations, that is super, super duper powerful. And there were some interesting things about this that I don't know, these are just the things I remember from the book. Things like you are most likely to be introduced to a romantic partner by somebody else. So most of us meet our romantic partners not through dating apps, not through just randomly meeting somebody on the street, but because we're introduced to them by our friends or by our family members. Our friend says, oh, hey, this is my friend so-and-so, and boom, sparks start to fly. And that's actually the most common way. People meet their romantic partners mostly through friends, through introductions. So it's kind of like, not necessarily, it kind of like that person was a weak tie, right? They're a friend of a friend, or even a friend of a friend of a friend in that 3 degrees of impact. But then they might become the most important person in your life. So there's so much power and potential kind of at the periphery of your own social network. And then this one, which was making me laugh a minute ago, it's gonna make me laugh now. It's no laughing matter, but it's just a weird thing that I remember from the book, that they said that you are 2 times more likely to contract chlamydia from somebody you meet online. I don't know why that's relevant to bring up right now, but I thought it was interesting. Maybe you do too. And it kind of, again, it's kind of like a weak tie, right? Someone you meet online, you probably don't really have connections to otherwise, but it has a pretty big, powerful potential to impact your life in a way that might not be so great. Although at least it's bacterial and easy to get rid of in the modern world. Thank you, medicine. So let's talk about this superorganism real quick, and then I think that's pretty much all I had for this book review today. I just want to leave you with some kind of questions, some thoughts. I don't really have the answer, and they didn't propose any answers in this book either, but just the kind of like a philosophical question. If everything that other people do impact us so much, how much credit can we really take for anything? If me making this video, all the people in my life who have influenced me and impacted me to get me to where I am now, they all deserve a little bit of the credit. If you're hearing this and watching this and listening to this, you are part of the reason that I do this. So you get to take some of the credit for this video's existence. And it's kind of like that with anything we do. It's like we can't take full credit for it. Again, we love to think we're so independent, but we fail to realize how much different things influence us. And if you study psychology, you know the ideas of priming. Just by the way that a question is worded on a survey changes the way that we answer it. You know, we don't think that we're influenced. We think, yeah, I just answered that question. But what we didn't realize is the conversation we had right before we answered that question impacted how we answered it. And that fight we had with our significant other that morning impacted how we went through the day and how we answered that question, how we did everything for maybe even more than that day. So there's just this kind of nuance to, well, how much credit can we really take? There's always other people that helped us to create anything we create. And then on the inverse, so instead of like wanting to take credit for something we're proud of or something positive, what about blame? So when someone does something mean or violent, is it completely their fault? Or does some blame rest on the people, you know, their parents or some circumstance that they're in? Maybe they're at the periphery of the social network. Maybe they were born on the periphery of the social network and they weren't taught social skills. And maybe they have some type of social deficit, like maybe they're on the autism spectrum or something, right? That's not totally their fault. And then the way people interact with them cause them to behave in these different ways, and it's not totally their fault. Even horrible crimes. A lot of times, I was just watching a documentary last night about a serial killer who was brutalized by his parents his whole childhood. It's so hard to say that he is 100% responsible for every single thing he's ever done since. It's really, really hard to divorce one individual person out of this big network and of kind of influence. Because if you think of those lines, right, we think of that web, those little pathways between us, they're sending so much information. There's information, there's behaviors, there's energy, there's resources flowing through this organism. There's so many things flowing. Money flows through here. STDs flow through here. I mean, so many different things, emotions flow through this superorganism that it's really hard to find an origin for any of it. You know, where does the buck stop? Who really can we blame? And who really can we credit? I don't have an answer for you, but I thought it was a pretty interesting question. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed this book review of Connected, The Amazing Power of Social Networks and How They Shape Our Lives by Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler. I'm currently reading a book called Feeding You Lies. I don't know the subtitle, but it's about big food industries and some of the lies that we've been told, at least in America, about what food really is nutritious and what's important when we're looking at food. So I'll be doing a review on that here very soon. I hope you'll sign up for my book review email on my website, nextjuice.com, and feel free to scroll through my books playlist here on my YouTube, as well as my new podcast playlist, Next Talks. And right now it's just one episode up, but maybe by the time you've seen this, there'll be 2 or even more. Thanks for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I love you. You are worthy of being loved and feeling comfortable in your own skin. Expreme medium, squeeze the day. This has been A Moment in Time with Nex, and if you like this video, please consider supporting at the website nexjuice.com. Bye.